Rex Sims,
Here.
Robert Bornstein,
Here.
Anthony Rassio.
And
Tony?
it does not appear Tony's here, but someone said they saw him earlier. But we're going to go ahead and continue. Is that everybody, Deb?
Yes.
Okay. Today, we're going to review a following ordinance for the consistency with the Bonita Springs Comprehensive Plan. You want to go ahead and read that? An ordinance of the City of Bonita Springs, Florida, providing for adoption of a comprehensive plan amendment to the future land use element, amending the Coconut Village future land use category, and to amend the future land use map for approximately 30.51 acres of land from City of Bonita Springs Resource Protection and Lee County outlying suburban and wetlands to the City of Bonita Springs Coconut Village and Resource Protection future land use categories as depicted on the proposed future land use map, providing for intent, providing for severability, providing for an effective date. That sound good? And is there any public comment before we get started? Any public comment at this time?
Looks like we have some trying to connect.
Okay,
Do we want to, maybe, Mr. Chairman, we can move forward the staff presentation first while they try to link in?
why don't we do that? We're gonna have.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Rooney, it's Rich Ivanovich. Can you hear us?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. I'm sorry. I didn't know when you were talking about public comment. I thought you meant the general public, not the petitioner. Is it our time to go or is it staff's time to go?
I would have the applicant, if the applicant is ready, we can have the applicant go.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate that. Good morning. For the record, Rich Ivanovich on behalf of the applicant. Since this is the first time I've appeared before you in this Zoom format, we're going to make sure we can share our screen, so can you let us share our screen, please?
Rich, did you bring your own podium?
I did. Thank you. I wanted to make it as much as a normal hearing as possible. So we're hopefully we're going to be loaded up here in a second. I apologize for the delay. It keeps saying host is disabled participant screen sharing.
Here you guys go. Sorry about that.
Okay. All righty. I think we're ready. We're good? Can everybody see our screen?
Yes. Yes.
All right. Thank you. Again, my name is Rich Ivanovich, and I am the attorney representing the petitioner in this application. I want to kind of give you a highlight of how we're going to proceed today and give you an overview of the project. Our presentation is approximately 45 minutes long when we get through all the screen, but I wanted to introduce the project team. Not everybody's going to present during the initial presentation, but everybody is here to answer any questions you may have if you have them. I will do a brief overview of the project. Mark Wilson from London Bay will do an introduction of the vision of the project that London Bay has. Alexis Crespo, a professional planner from Waldrop Engineering, will make the detailed planning presentation. The rest of the people on this list, Ted Treesh, Dan Trescott, Mark Kincaid, and Micah Jackson are all here to answer any specific questions you may have regarding environmental, water management, transportation. They're all here to answer any questions that you may have. As a brief overview, the property we're here to talk about is approximately 30.5 acres. Everybody refers to it as the old Weeks Fish Camp property. It's at
Rich,
the end.
could I stop you for just a second?
Yes, sir.
I got some emails indicating that some of the public can't hear any sound on the Zoom. Addison, can you confirm that?
Are
Are we getting sound out on it?
I'm
Or
hearing
is there an
everything just
alternative
fine.
streaming?
They should be.
Okay.
Now, they might not hear it on the cable provider side because Vince has ran into an issue there. But
Okay,
if they're on the website or they're on Zoom on the phone, they should hear everything.
okay, I'll check. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
The property, as I said, is approximately 30.5 acres. It's located at the end of Coconut Road, about 2 miles west of US 41 and just north of the Hyatt Regency Coconut Point Resort. We're here for 2 requests. One is an amendment to your growth management plan map series, as well as your the village, the Coconut Village subdistrict that's in your comp plan. Essentially, what we're doing is we're adding approximately 13 acres to the north side of the existing approved growth management plan designation. We're bringing that into the city's comprehensive plan. Right now, it is in the county's outlying suburban and wetlands categories. So we're bringing that into the city of Bonita Springs, and we're making some changes to the text within the subdistrict for the Coconut Village subdistrict. The text changes primarily are to add a 300-unit multifamily option or a 300-unit independent living facility and 75 ALF unit continuing care facility option in the existing subdistrict. Those 2 options don't currently exist. What we're also doing is we're adding specific commitments to public access to the water that doesn't currently exist in the growth management plan language. It does exist in the underlying zoning, but we're going to add it to the comprehensive plan. And as Alexis will take you through and Mark will take you through, we're actually increasing the public commitments that currently exist in the underlying zoning. Another aspect of this is that in bringing the additional 13 acres in, we're not really adding any intensity in regard to bringing those 13 acres in. We would be spreading out what's currently authorized on the roughly 17 acres of development area to the 13 acres of development area. And as you'll hear, it's a reduction in overall intensity and density on the project. This is the existing configuration that I just took you through. The orange cross-hatched area or diagonally crossed area is the area that we're bringing in under the map series. That's approximately 13 acres. You could see what was the gold cross-hatched area is now becoming Coconut Village. And in the upper right corner, you'll see a small area of green that is a wetland area that's coming in as resource protection. I just took you through what the amendments were to basically add residential as an option and continuing care facility as an option. Our presentation schedule is going to be Mark Wilson will talk to you about London Bay and the vision for London Bay. Alexis will take you through the property history and property overview and the comprehensive planning consistency, and then we'll address staff report and conclusions. Typically, we like to get through our presentation in full before asking questions, but obviously it's at your discretion to answer questions or ask questions at any time. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mark, and then we'll continue on. Thank you.
Thank you, Rich, and good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for making yourself available with this technology. I hope that the technology gremlins stay away from us, and so far so good. So let me get into a little bit about London Bay. So London Bay was formed approximately 30 years ago. I formed the company back in 1990 as a luxury home builder. And over the last 30 years, we've grown into a fairly diverse group of companies that obviously includes a substantial development arm. I think it's important when you're looking at a project like this to understand that we're a local company. We have local management and we have local ownership. We've been here as part of the community for 30 years and hopefully will be around for at least that long in the future. Therefore, we care about what we do. We care about the community. We care about Southwest Florida. And I think that's an important aspect. We're not a developer flying in to do one project. We've got an excellent team over the years, built up approximately 100 great people on our team, and very professional in what they do. And we've been fortunate to build up a reputation over the years in terms of the integrity in which we deal with people. We're well known for terrific customer service. We've always been a leader in design, as I've mentioned, professional group. And fortunately, we've got the financial strength to develop a project such as we are talking about, which will obviously be over a number of years and also might go through economic cycle. I think it's also important to understand as a company, we also care about our people. We've been a Blue Zone company for many years now, and long before Blue Zone, we also had a wellness program in the company. So we care about our people and the team. So our vision for the project is to create a legacy project, not only for London Bay, but for the city of Bonita Springs. We believe what we're designing and what we're suggesting will create a world-class project in Southwest Florida on a very, very important remaining piece of waterfront land. I think if you see what we've been doing recently in terms of development, especially on the senior living side, I think we're creating a new resort-style luxury community that really you can't see anywhere else in the United States, and we expect to do the same again here. I think it's important to also emphasize what Richard's mentioned is we're giving an increase to the public access over what was there previously, and perpetual access to the water access. For all the private ownership that has happened before this, nobody turned around and said, we will guarantee perpetual access to the water. We're doing that. And I think it's also important to point out that the city and the taxpayers are going to get a first-class marina and that public access at absolutely no cost to themselves. I think the whole project is based on our core values. It will be very high quality. We deal with everybody that we deal with integrity and respect, and we value people's opinions, and we are really trying to do something special in Bonita Springs and include the people that live in Estero. There's been an awful lot of misinformation about public access in the marina, and I think you're going to get most of the questions from the public again around the marina. So if you'll bear with me, I'm going to spend a few moments on this. So I've got a chart here that shows what was previously approved for the Estero Bay Resort and was currently, and then what we're suggesting as Bayview. And I'm just going to quickly go through this. Both times there was one single boat ramp. They had a single boat ramp and we've got a single boat ramp. In terms of on-site parking, we're actually increasing trailer parking from 10 to 15. That's a 50% increase in trailer parking. They had no kayak launch. We're including a kayak and paddleboard launch. They had no further on-site parking for regular vehicular traffic, and we've got 8 standard parking spaces on site. They had no park provided. We've designed a lovely sunset park right on the water as part of the project. They had no public restrooms. We are including public restrooms. There was no pedestrian access along Coconut Road. We're including that. They had no ship store. We're going to include a ship store. And in addition to that, we've bought another piece of land, common ownership, to provide additional parking for those busy weekends of the year where we might need additional parking that will provide for 10 trailer parking spaces off-site and 14 car parking spaces off-site. And again, they did not provide for that. A couple of other facts, I think, is when we first got approached when we first approached the city and spoke to the council members and to the staff, one of the requests that they had was, please get involved with the community, and talk to all of the interested parties. And I think over the last couple of years, it's fair to say I felt a little bit more like a politician than I have as a developer, because we've met with so many different parties, either myself with Danville Ledbetter, or him or me on our own, have met with over 60 groups now. And we've basically taken the approach of, we wanted to talk to all of our neighbors, we wanted to talk to all of the HOAs, meet with interested groups, and really anybody who wanted to talk to us, whether they were against what we were suggesting or whether they were for what we were suggesting, we met with them. We're a big believer in having a dialogue and be open to commentary. And we might not agree with each other, but I think it's very important to understand where each other is coming from. So again, just a little bit more on the marina. On the left is what it used to be as Weeks Fish Camp. And on the right is our vision for this marina. And as you can see, it's an absolutely first-class marina and probably better than most that's available in Southwest Florida. Here's another plan view. And this is just to show you where the ramp is and where the trailer parking is. We took an awful lot of input from the community and experts in terms of the parking and the traffic flow in the parking for easy launch of the boats, and we've taken that into account and incorporated it. This gives you another view, and I think right in the bottom right-hand corner is the Sunset Park, which will have picnic benches and the ability to sit out and see a sunset. And again, just a nice view of the marina. And I think here, I think this is important as well. This shows the public restrooms and the ship store. And then you'll see in the middle of the picture is the kayak and paddleboard launch, which we thought is very important. I'm a kayaker and a paddleboarder. I can understand why people love to get out on the bay, and I think it's a great addition to the marina. But it also shows that there's plenty of room away from the launching of the boat, so it's very safe. And we've dedicated the first number of spaces so people can launch their boat, tie it up, and park, and then come back to the boat. And this just gives a quick, I'll just quickly go through what we've done, and I'm afraid I haven't got a pointer, but if you look at the numbers, you can see this. So number 1 is where the parking is. Number 2 shows the public restrooms. Number 3, the boat ramp. Number 4, the shaded area, is the 10 public spaces that will be available for people to come in and enjoy. Number 5 is the paddle boat launch. Number 6 is the 2 additional spaces that we've got for the emergency fire and police to be able to use, emergency services. Number 7, we are reserving for a luxury boat club that will be open to not only the residents of the community, but also the public. Number 8 is the public park I've mentioned. And number 9 is along Coconut Road. We are working with Lee County staff to allow right-of-way parking all the way along Coconut Road to give even additional parking. So that's a quick summary. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Alexis to take you through things in more detail. Thanks again for listening.
Thank you.
Good morning. Alexis Crespo with Waldrop Engineering representing the applicant. Rich and Mark did a great job of outlining the general information on the request as well as the significant public access being provided by the project. I'm going to get into a little bit more of the technical details. We will be as brief as possible, and we do have the entire team here if you'd like to get into any detailed questions on the information. This slide shows a nice aerial view of the property as it exists today. You can see some of the remaining infrastructure from the former Weeks Fish Camp with the marina facility on the waterfront, and then the roadways that provided access to some of the residential structures that were on the property. You can see clearly from the aerial, this is an infill site. You've got the timeshare sales facility to the immediate east of the property, the Hyatt Regency Coconut Point, very prominent to our south. And then to our north, we have golf course uses as the Raptor Bay parcel. So surrounded by development with the exception of the beautiful Estero Bay to our immediate west. You can tell from this aerial as well that there's been historical impacts to the property. The uplands have largely been impacted by not only the marina, but these residential structures that have been on site for decades. That included both single family as well as mobile homes. Those were serviced by well and septic. And you can see there was limited infrastructure to serve those uses over time. The property was annexed into the city in phases as noted in your staff report. The southern portion annexed in 2014 comprising just over 17 acres, with the northern piece about 13 acres being annexed the following year. The 2014 phase 1 annexation also came along with a companion commercial plan development rezoning approval for a maximum of 207,000 square feet of commercial uses. The intent was to do a private marina, have a public access boat ramp and some amenities, but a significant amount of non-residential commercial uses permitted on this site just for phase 1, operating under that Coconut Village future land use category. So when this site was brought in from the county to the city, a portion of it was significantly intensified by that CPD zoning. Nothing has been developed under that CPD zoning to date, and the property was purchased by London Bay in 2018 in hopes of finally getting this property redeveloped as it deserves to be. This is an historical area. It's not that old though, just 15 years ago. You can see the residential structures on the site, again, serviced by well and septic, relative lack of infrastructure, with the single boat ramp there on the left-hand side of the screen. The parking was crushed shell, not very well marked. So we want to walk you through the vision to really enhance this facility and make it more highly usable by the public. Something else that has changed since this property was historically developed as the marina is the surrounding area. This is really the epicenter of development in Southwest Florida. It's one of the last remaining waterfront properties, and the quality of uses that have come around this property over the last 20, 30 years by way of Pelican Landing, Raptor Bay, the Hyatt. It's really lends this site to be a quality infill with some really good synergy with surrounding uses. So I've noted the Estero Bay Aquatic Preserve to our west. To our north, we have some remaining portions of those preserve and mangrove areas. Also immediately north, we have the Raptor Bay parcel. It's currently golf course uses. Further north of that is timeshare and other recreational amenities. And the city is reviewing the proposal for additional residential uses on that parcel closest to the subject property. As you move to the east, we have the timeshare sales facility, as well as additional golf course and preserve uses. As we move around to our south and get to the Coconut Road frontage, some of Pelican Landing's recreational infrastructure, golf course maintenance facilities are located along that roadway. I'm not able to point, but the off-site parking facility that Mark noted London Bay has purchased in order to supplement parking for this project is shown in the bottom right-hand side of your screen. It says Bayview off-site parking very near that Coconut Road label. And that is where we are going to house the additional boat trailer and standard vehicle parking to supplement what we are able to fit on the Bayview site. And so you can see very close proximity to the subject property. As you move to the south, these are lands within Pelican Landing, the colony. These are multifamily residential uses predominantly as you transition back to the bay to the west. And then lastly, the Pelican Landing Marina is on the left-hand side of your screen. So what we're proposing to achieve through this text and map amendment, as well as a companion plan development rezoning that your staff is reviewing as being scheduled for public hearing, is a residential project, as well as ancillary commercial and public access and amenities to the waterfront. As Rich noted, there is an intent to do 300 continuing care facility units. This could be ILF, as well as supplementary assisted living facility beds. Should this project be developed as conventional multifamily, that is also an option under the proposed text amendment. So depending on market demand, which we have seen over the decade, over even the last 6 months, can change dramatically, especially in Southwest Florida, they are seeking the ability to do either a conventional multifamily project or the continuing care facility. If it's conventional multifamily, we would not have the memory care assisted living beds associated with that. Regardless of which avenue they choose on the residential portion, the following bullets are committed public access amenities to the waterfront, and that includes 72 boat slips, 12 of which would be dedicated to public use, 10 slips for the public, and then 2 for those first responders, including the fire and sheriff office. The marina would have 1 public boat ramp, which was, again, what was approved in 2014 as part of the Estero Bay Marina and what the Weeks Fish Camp offered historically on this site. We're adding the amenities of kayak launch, paddleboard launch, committing to the ship store and restroom facilities, and then increasing the boat trailer and standard vehicle parking beyond what was approved back in 2014. There is a waterfront park proposed, as well as the offsite parking facility that we've noted. This slide shows your current future land use map. You can see the phase 1 lands are in the Coconut Village future land use category. This is a City of Bonita Springs category that was adopted concurrently with annexation. And the green areas within the city's resource protection future land use category, which is reserved to protect jurisdictional wetlands, which that area is largely mangrove. So the remaining area, approximately 13 acres, retains Lee County future land use designations. Clearly, this property's been in the city for many years now, and it's appropriate to convert phase 2 to a Lee County or City of Bonita Springs category. And so as Rich noted, the logical land use pattern to obtain here is to extend Coconut Village to cover the entire uplands of the property, and then have any jurisdictional wetlands, which we've shown here, within your resource protection future land use category. And so the total amount of acreage within Coconut Village upon adoption of the amendment is 26.38 acres, and then approximately 4.13 acres of resource protection. To summarize the text amendments, we weren't going to walk you through line by line through the changes, but the proposed strike-through underlines reflect the ability to do continuing care and multifamily residential uses. Residential density has historically been allowed in this category, 6 units per acre, and noted as part of a resort-style complex. The language will help solidify the types of residential uses that would be permitted and allow for that option of either CCF or conventional multifamily. It would be or, it would not be both. Because of the way your code calculates density for continuing care facilities, the density of that option is actually 6.4 units per acre, so a fairly nominal increase over what is allowed today within Coconut Village. When you look at the 300 units, that calculation is a standard calculation, which results in 11.4 units per acre for the multifamily option. In either case, it is 300 units. The other changes made just update antiquated regulatory references within the text. FEMA is now 1 foot above base flood elevation, so just noting that the buildings would need to conform to that new standard, and also updating references to coastal high hazard as that has changed in statutes since adoption of the text. And the other thing we're doing here is putting these public access commitments into the comprehensive plan, which we know that land development codes can be deviated from, zoning conditions can be modified. When something is committed to in the comprehensive plan, it is a higher level of commitment, in my professional planning opinion, simply because text amendments would require public hearings, transmittal to the Department of Economic Opportunity. So this was our way of ensuring to the public that what we're proposing is not only in the zoning ordinance, but also the comprehensive plan, and spelling out those commitments very clearly. In terms of public infrastructure impacts, when you look at the 1.2 FAR permitted in Coconut Village, if that were to be expanded upon the entire 30.5 acres or 26.3 acres of uplands, the intensity of this site would be much, much greater than what's being proposed with the 300 CCF or 300 multifamily. We have committed that any commercial would be accessory, so we cannot do that very intensive commercial alongside the residential uses. The result is much less demand and impact on the public infrastructure system. Staff is in agreement. They've outlined that in their staff report and noted the availability letters we've secured from all the required agencies confirming available service and infrastructure for the project. In that vein, we've submitted a detailed traffic impact study that compares what is allowable today under the comprehensive plan in the Coconut Village, again, with an FAR of 1.2, and also just based upon the 207,000 square feet confirmed through the CPD zoning approval in 2014. So today, the trips generated by the CPD is just over 3,500 trips per day. The most intensive version of our development program, which would be the 300 multifamily units and some ancillary commercial, would produce 1,843 trips per day. So a significant reduction to the number of trips allowed by current zoning is the outcome of this amendment and companion plan development. It's also important to note that CCF and ALF uses generate less traffic. The residents are generally less mobile, more dependent upon shuttle and other transportation options. And so the trips would be even lesser if that option is pursued. So a minimum reduction of 1,700 trips per day is confirmed through our traffic study. Ted Treese has also worked with the Village of Estero as they have extensively studied Coconut Road. They've hired outside consultants to map out improvements needed long-term, and our TIS has taken those into account and provided data back to those outside consultants so they can plan appropriately. And in terms of coastal high hazard hurricane preparedness, Dan Trescott is on the team. He prepared a detailed hurricane preparedness and mitigation analysis that we've submitted with our application. The analysis concludes the amendments are consistent with the comprehensive plan and land development code in terms of providing the necessary evacuation plans and the necessary mitigation for shelter impacts as part of the development process. So your comprehensive plan very clearly provides the framework that projects need to meet in order to develop in these areas, and our project, as conditioned, will fully comply. It's also important to note that either for multifamily or for the CCF option, this project will trigger a comprehensive evacuation management plan where the developer will map out how to shelter in place effectively, as well as how to evacuate the facility, any employees as well as visitors, depending on the nature of the storm. So all of these things are contemplated and required as we move through the process. Getting into environmental, which certainly was a lot of the discussion at the neighborhood information meetings. We heard strong voices about wanting more boat ramps and also strong voices about the Estero Bay is a jewel and we need to protect it. And we've struggled with water quality in Southwest Florida. So how can we ensure that the redevelopment of this property is going to be enhancing that natural resource? So we can't emphasize enough how we've attempted through the conditions, through the language to really balance environmental protection with public access to the waterfront. We've noted that the site is heavily impacted. There's well and septic on it. Certainly remediating those facilities, getting this property connected to central water and sewer will be a vast improvement. We're also preserving, restoring on-site wetland areas, including that small area in the northeast corner of the site that's been impacted over time. London Bay has also hired Mark Kincaid, who is a marine consultant and civil engineer who has worked on the redesign of the marina to ensure better water quality and created a new tidal flushing system to help connect the basin with the tidal area and ensure that we're increasing the water quality within the area. So all these items have been done in order to, again, achieve that balance of access with environmental protection. You've heard a lot about the access and the amenities. I won't go through the entire list again. I just want to reemphasize that the current CPD approval has 10 boat trailer parking spaces committed today, 1 public boat ramp, and we are proposing to do 15 on-site trailer spaces as well, an enhancement there, as well as more publicly available wet slips. So when we go down the list of everything that was committed to in that zoning ordinance dating back to 2014, and we compare our list of public amenities, we are clearly in absolutely every facet either meeting or exceeding what the city has today via that ordinance. Mark's noted community outreach on the project has been extensive. They've really focused a lot on meeting with stakeholders throughout the process. In addition to that, we are required to have 2 neighborhood workshops, both at the time of submittal as well as prior to public hearings. So we've conducted those over the course of the last 2 years. This has been a project that has taken a while to get through because it's needed to be thoughtfully reviewed by your staff. All public meetings have been well attended. We've hosted them at the Estero High School to ensure people could fit. Fortunately, we were able to get through those prior to COVID. So we had our last meeting in January of 2020. And we heard a lot about access, the boat ramp, and also protection of water quality. And also the residents of the immediate area very concerned about Coconut Road and wanting to balance compatibility with their neighborhoods in light of others' requests to really create a big regional boating facility on the site. So all of those items at play as we developed what is before you today. Staff has a detailed staff report. I think it's 500 pages in total. So I will not walk through every policy in there. We are in agreement with your staff that the application is consistent with the future land use element, infrastructure and transportation elements in terms of level of service, the environmental protection features, and the enhancements to the marina flushing all comply with your conservation and coastal management element. We will rely on that backup data within the package in our application materials for that consistency. The one item we need to discuss is the objective 5.2.4, which is the one area that staff noted may be deemed an inconsistency. They did note that this is subject to legislative interpretation several times in their report, but we do want to touch on this one specifically. So this policy was recently amended. However, it's applicable to the property either in its form before 2019 or after your ear-based amendments expanded it. So this policy states development in the coastal management area, except otherwise restricted by 5.2.1 and the city's Old 41 redevelopment area, which do not apply to this property certainly. So developments in the coastal management area shall be infill only and shall not exceed the surrounding property's density intensity as allowed by existing zoning at the adoption of this comprehensive plan. I think we're in agreement with staff. This is clearly an infill site. One key item is when we read this policy from a practical standpoint, when you annex a property into the city, it would not appear that this policy would apply to newly annexed properties coming in. And really the best example of that is this site itself. When it was annexed in 2014, the city adopted a future land use category that increased the density intensity. The Coconut Village allows 1.2 FAR, far greater than what outlying suburban allowed, far greater than the Lee County zoning at the time, and also allowed for density. So there's not a whole book of examples of annexations. A lot of your annexations have been Pelican Landing lots and smaller things that have not necessarily been in coastal high hazard. However, when we look at this policy in context to an annexation, we believe that this is simply not applicable to a property being annexed in. However, we do want to meet the measure here, and we believe that our project entirely does meet the measure of both infill, as you can just see on the aerial, as well as it is consistent with the surrounding properties' densities and intensities. The definition in your comprehensive plan for density doesn't say whether it's a gross or net calculation. So we can rely upon the fact that the policy states it shall not exceed surrounding properties, densities, and intensities, and looking at the net densities of surrounding areas, I think these could be classified as properties. They're distinct parcels that house high-rise condominiums in the Coconut or Pelican Landing DRI. And you look at the towers to our south, Altera is 25 units per acre, Florencia is 27.8 units per acre, Trevoso is 17.2, Sorrento just under 17 units per acre, so all significantly higher than what is proposed. And then 10.8 units per acre in the mid-rise just south of Coconut Road. And then Navona is over 20 units per acre as the last example. We do submit that net density is appropriate considering the text of the policy and considering that this is a measurement of what was deemed appropriate in terms of densities to locate in your coastal high hazard area, and also demonstrates compatibility to the extent that that is a question here. And then the last piece I'll note again is just the intensity that we're reducing from this site based on the FAR of 1.2, based on the acreage. Far greater intensity could be developed than what we are proposing through our CCF multifamily project. So just closing up here, the staff report notes that the application is consistent with the Bonita Plan goals, objective policies. They have cited 5.2.4 and noted it's subject to legislative interpretation. They have noted that the amendment balances the protection of natural resources with safe public access in perpetuity to the Estero Bay. They've noted that the project will increase water quality of the marina based upon their analysis of the application, and also that adequate and available public services and infrastructure are available. We submitted an economic impact statement. This isn't typically provided with a lot of the applications, but we felt it was a really important item to highlight specifically because the property has struggled to redevelop in any form for many years. And so this helped inform London Bay of the marketability of their proposal, but also the impacts to the local economy that can be reaped for the city of Bonita Springs. So a significant temporary impact of the construction jobs, just under 4,800 there, and 550 million of impacts to the city. 9 million in impact fees, permit fees, inspection fees, 139 direct and 89 indirect jobs once the facility is opened, and then annual operations impact of 27 million by the time the project is delivered in 2028. So very significant and certainly timely based on the economic situations we're in today. So to wrap up the planning testimony here, we have provided extensive data and analysis, as you can see in your staff report, and backup packages to support findings of consistency and compatibility. The proposed amendments are consistent with the Bonita Plan goals, objectives, and policies, do not create an internal inconsistency, and are consistent with Chapter 163 of Florida statutes. And again, will be a significant reduction in intensity on the site and will provide for a significant public benefit in terms of perpetual public access to the water with no cost to the public or city. With that, Rich, would you like to make any closing comments? Okay, we'll stand for questions you may have. Thank you.
I'd like to speak up if I could, Jeff.
Go ahead, Sam. Thank you.
You show a lot of compatibility, you say, with the staff recommendations and so forth. That as I'm reading the document here, there's a paragraph in here that shows inconsistencies, and it says the applicant's request modifies the intent, appropriate uses, and development standards of the Coconut Village future land use category by adding permissible uses and increased residential densities that would allow the placement of vulnerable populations in the coastal and high hazard area and coastal management areas. That the application appears inconsistent with the annexation agreement. How would you address that?
Or while I read it.
Board member Vincent, maybe what we ought to do, since that is a question based on the staff comments, is maybe we should have the staff report. And maybe that'll help flush things out and
That's
give the
fine.
applicant an opportunity.
We're going to defer that to staff and then we can address that comment at that point, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Okay. Do you need anything else further from us, or?
Are we good with him, Derek?
I don't have any questions. If there's any other board members have questions on their presentation, or they could just hold it until after staff answers those questions, and then we'll open up to public comment.
Yeah, why don't,
Let the staff give their.
yes,
Okay, thank you.
staff report. Thank you very much.
Jack, you can't hear you. You're talking. Still can't hear you.
Yeah.
Okay, there we go.
She's on mute.
I think she's just trying to get the presentation up before she starts.
Hey, Addison. Jeez, here we go.
Yes, I hear a big loop there. You guys have multiple connections. Which one are you trying to use for audio? The phone? There you go.
Great. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Okay. Okay. Thank you, Chairman Maturo. For the record, Jacqueline Genson with Community Development, here to provide the staff presentation. As part of this application request, this is the team that went ahead and provided review comments, participated. So it was myself, Mr. Dahmer, the Community Development Director, David Theriak for Staff Legal Counsel, Laura Gibson with Environmental Review, Tom Ross, our Transportation Reviewer, Stuart Smith, our City Engineer, Jay Sweet, who's our City Surveyor and also a Professional Planner, the Village of Estero, and Lee County. On the line today, I do have Tom Ross joining us remotely, and then I also have Laura Gibson and Jay Sweet in our office, and Mr. Theriak is available by phone, or sorry, on Zoom, and so is Mr. Dolmer. Just to summarize the application and request, as the applicant stated, this is 2 comprehensive plan amendment requests that are being reviewed consistent with the expedited state review process as set forth in Florida statute. Comprehensive plan requests are legislative in nature, and they're subject to the fairly debatable standard of review, which will be probably more so explained to the City Council at the transmittal hearing. The action today before you is the local planning agency review as required by Florida statute. As part of this presentation, we do have public comment, and I know Addison needs to go ahead and make sure that the chairman allows proper time so he can go ahead and queue that properly. We did receive multiple emailed comments. Those were distributed to staff, the applicant's team, and also the LPA. So every comment that we received from Monday up until late yesterday afternoon was sent to the local planning agency. The next steps in terms of this process is there will be a City Council transmittal hearing before the application is essentially decided on whether or not it will be sent up to the state for review. That public hearing is scheduled for August 5th. It is a night meeting. I'm still verifying with city administration in terms of the location. So we will go ahead and provide separate notice in the newspaper, and we'll also update posting on the property once that location is solidified, and it will meet the statutory deadlines for noticing. The transmittal hearing, what that does, just to go ahead and educate the public and the board, is the transmittal hearing essentially allows staff to go ahead and send the package, which is the adoption request, up to the state for review. The state and specific review agencies will have 30 days from receipt of our package to provide their comments as set forth in statute. It's very narrowly scoped on what those agencies will review the application request for. Once that 30-day review period is up, typically the state planning agency sends a letter to the city with their technical assistance comments or any objections or comments they may have. And then at that time, we would go ahead and schedule the adoption hearing. We anticipate, based on the timing, that it could be October 21st for the adoption hearing. Also coupled with this request is a rezoning action. That is for the Bayview Onestero Bay RPD and CPD. That is a separate request, and the zoning is to go ahead and implement the comprehensive plan, if you will. That date for the zoning board is set sometime in September. I will not know that date until our August 4th meeting, where we will go ahead and determine that date. That case will be noticed based on the Land Development Code and also statutory requirements. So a mail notice will go out to properties within 375 feet. We will post the property, and then a legal ad will be run in the paper. And then once it goes to the zoning board, it will be scheduled for first and second readings before City Council. And I've included those dates as well. We anticipate it could be October 7th for the first reading and the 21st for the second reading. And the reason why I wanted to bring the zoning case up at this meeting is because some of the public concerns do address some specificity where their comments may also be appropriate for discussion during that land use case. Regarding the location map, the applicant already went over this pretty much in detail in terms of where the property is located. So this is the area of discussion for today. As explained in the staff report, this is, there are two separate requests. The first one that we would like to discuss is obviously the text amendment, and we'll go over this in more detail on other slides. But this is included in the staff report, so for those of you that are following us online, this is in the LPA packet for you to also review if you cannot view it entirely through this format. But this goes over the actual text changes that they are requesting to the existing Coconut Village future land use category. And then the second request is actually to amend the map. As they previously had stated, a portion of the property, as we call phase one, has been assigned a city land use classification. However, the phase two portion of the property has not. So this action would go ahead and bring it into a city classification. The staff recommendation, as enumerated in the staff report, is for the City Council to exercise their legislative authority and to determine whether or not to submit the comprehensive plan amendment requests, specifically as modified by the staff. We did make one change in the text for compliance as it relates to marina siting and the Lee County Protection Plan for manatees. Other items to really point out is a few years ago, as a result of input from the public, there was a request to go ahead and amend the Land Development Code, which would set a standard for requiring an affirmative vote of 5 or more members of the City Council to approve a request where there was building heights in excess of 75 feet. So because this future land use map request involves designating property where buildings in excess of 75 feet could be developed, this standard would apply to this comprehensive plan map request. As outlined in the staff report, we have identified generally an inconsistency with the 2014 annexation agreement, which was essentially the basis for how the original Coconut Village land use category was created. And we'll go over that a little bit more later in the presentation, but it's also included in a chart in the staff report. And as the applicant has also pointed out, we did identify an inconsistency with the comprehensive plan for objective 5.2 of the conservation coastal management element, specifically one policy, and we'll go over that a little more in detail later as well. Our findings of fact analysis, and this is also included in the staff report, essentially sets forth just the history of events of how we got to where we are today. The annexation agreement was adopted in 2014. It was an agreement between 3 separate LLCs in the city for the future redevelopment of this property based on a vision that those property owners had in 2014. The annexation agreement did contemplate a phase 1 and phase 2 annexation, and that was because the property owners did not have total land control at the time for both phases. They were still in the process of assembling land in phase 2 in 2014. So that is why you'll see the phase 1 and phase 2 references in the staff report. So for phase 1 was annexed in 2014. The comprehensive plan amendment, which established the Coconut Village category, was done at that time, along with the Estero Bay Marina CPD. It's important to note that the CPD did expire in 2014, but the zoning ordinance in itself, in terms of the permitted uses and those conditions of approval, still remain in effect until a new MCP is adopted or an amendment is filed. What I wanted to point out in that CPD was that the applicant is correct. There were specific conditions in that CPD, such as condition H for the 10 boat trailer spaces. There was also a condition 11 in there as well for public access, which required 10% of the wet slips to be available for public use, but also that the boat ramp would be available for public use. So that's enumerated in condition 11. What I also like to point out is on the master concept plan that was adopted as part of condition 1, is that you saw in the master concept plan the wet slips, the dry slips, which was the boat storage, a fisherman's park, and also a point park, the boat ramp, the 10 spaces, but also an outfitter store and a restaurant. And while some of those uses were not specifically required to be run by the public or open to the public, some of those commercial establishments, just like your regional and community shopping malls, they're run by a commercial entity, but they're still open and available for the public for use. So just something to consider. Also, other things that occurred was there was a limited review development order that staff had issued, and it expired in 2014. And that was for them to go ahead and more so harden the existing marina where there were slips. That has expired. There was also in 2015 a development order application that was filed for the property where staff provided one round of comments. And on that development order, it was for a 15,000 square foot restaurant, the 150 dry boat storage facility, a 1.9 thousand square foot beach bar, and also the public boat ramp. With that development order application, as I had said, it went through one round of staff comments, and the applicant never had the opportunity to respond, so the application was vacated and expired and has been withdrawn. For phase 2, that was annexed in 2015, and that was because at that time they had finally completed the lot assemblage they needed in that area. And no application to amend the comprehensive plan or zoning was done at that time. And the reason why is because they started to have meetings with city administration and staff and shared with us that they were having difficulty in securing financing to implement the vision that they had as contemplated in the annexation agreement. And at that time, they started to explore alternative development scenarios. There were other contract purchasers that had met with the city to discuss other scenarios on the property. Many of them involved high-rise tower development. Some of them did not contemplate public access at all, but we as staff made sure that was an important theme to communicate, that public access was very important to the city. So we had a couple applications that were filed in the fall of 2015. They did not continue through the process, and they were withdrawn in 2016. And then here we are today with the current ownership, where they had purchased the property in 2018, and we've been processing their requests since that time. This slide right here already goes over information that the applicant has already gone over. We are in agreement with the information that they had shared, relying on the existing comprehensive plan and future land use map designation, the proposal, the existing zoning, and the existing uses. So I will continue. Again, I'm going to apologize to the public if they can't view this greatly on their screens, but this is actually the Exhibit A that is in the staff report. So again, if you have that document with you, you will see Exhibit A. But these are the specific changes that the applicant is requesting. How we go ahead and process amendments to existing text is you'll see the new language in underline, and you will see the strike through, or the language they're trying to remove in strike through. So that is what you see before you in the screen. And what you'll notice is in the introduction to the policy, make sure everyone can see where my arrow is. The introduction to the policy establishes the intent of what that future land use category is intended to do. So you'll see in the original text, the intent was to establish marine, retail, hotel uses, and office uses, and really to have the access to the Estero Bay. And with the changes, you will see there's the introduction of new uses that the applicant is wanting to put in their development program. So you'll see the addition of the restaurant, continuing care, nursing facilities, and independent uses to support that use, but also the multifamily. Next, what you have as you move through, it's not atypical where the city and all of our other future land use classifications will then go ahead and identify the appropriate uses in which one would anticipate to develop. And that's where you'll see the residential dwellings was initially only contemplated as being a part of the development program, where we would allow the residential uses as part of the resort complex. In this case, that language is proposed as being removed. And then you have the addition of the continuing care, independent, and assisted living uses. Next, we go into the development standards. So here we go into the calculation of density and intensity, and staff has no objections to those items that are cleared out. In C4, you'll see the language regarding the increase in density, where you'll see the increase from 6 dwelling units an acre to the 11.4 for one scenario, or the 6.4 under their other scenario, depending on the request that they move forward with. They're also putting into the text, they're essentially memorializing what the Land Development Code allows, which is equivalency factors for certain uses. And that's a by right standard that's established in the existing Land Development Code. Other items that they're placing in pertain to buffering between uses. Typically not something you would normally see in a comprehensive plan amendment, but there's no objection from staff for that requested language. Here we have the height standards. Really no changes there other than the modification to FEMA plus the 1 foot of freeboard that's required by the Florida Building Code. Other changes you'll see for the coastal high hazard. Not really many changes for that either. The city has also made changes to their coastal high hazard standards to be consistent with Chapter 163. The language that they struck was language that was added in anticipation of this category being applied to other lands within property that was subject to a development of regional impact. The applicant is recommending to remove that language because this property is not. The next one, G, is new language proposed by the applicant, and essentially there's a recommendation to add this to set a minimum standard of how to provide the public access. and they have specifically asked to put that in the comprehensive plan. The modification that you'll see in red was recommended by staff, and this is because with these marina type facilities, they are subject to review by Lee County and our staff for consistency with the boat facility siting plan of Lee County. And mainly that's also deals with our manatee protections. The future land use map, this is the next slide. So you'll see the existing future land use map, which shows the property of phase 1, which was given the city classification of resource protection in the Coconut Village. And then you'll see the phase 2 lands, which have the designation of outlying suburban and some small wetlands here in this area right here where my cursor is. And then the next picture down to below is the proposed future land use map designation. So the areas in green are the resource protection areas, your pink is Coconut Village, and the other green area over here is also resource protection. So our staff analysis. This is outlined in our staff report, and I wanted to go ahead and bring your attention to staff report pages 6 and 7. And what we did is we tried to outline in a chart what the annexation agreement contemplated, what the initial Coconut Village and CPD of phase 1 contemplated, and what the request is essentially contemplating today. And some of the big changes are that this request it's modifying the intent of the Coconut Village category. It's adding more residential and non-residential uses and placing less emphasis on the original intent of the annexation agreement for the uses of marine, retail, hotel, and office uses. So that is a change that staff has observed as part of this request. They're also modifying the appropriate uses so that residential uses are allowed without being in a resort complex. So again, it just changes the nature and intent of why the Coconut Village category was created. There is an increase in density under both development scenarios, albeit minimal for the continuing care option. And staff's concern with that, and we'll get more into that, is when staff went ahead and did the review of the Coconut Village category in 2014, it's important to note that the applicant at that time was requesting 10 dwelling units an acre, and staff objected to that change, and we recommended 6. And the reason why we recommended 6 is because the other lands that were incorporated into the city to the south, and also within the Pelican Landing DRI, the city classified those or assigned those a category of moderate density mixed-use plan development. And within that land use category, there is references to 6 dwelling units an acre. And in some cases, there's 9 dwelling units an acre if an approved Lee County development order was established. And then there's also provisions in that category about coastal high hazard area increases. But that's why the staff in 2014 recommended 6 dwelling units an acre. We were comfortable with that increase at that time because it was consistent with the areas that the city had designated when we adopted our comprehensive plan. This increase in density before you today, you do have your 6.4 dwelling units an acre under the continuing care option. And then you have under the standalone multifamily option, the 11.4 dwelling units an acre. And that is an increase in density over what we assigned neighboring properties when we adopted our comprehensive plan. And it exceeds the density that's afforded under the Lee plan. So that is where staff is coming from in our review of this petition in terms of an increase in density. What I'll also show is that the new text, it does establish a minimum public access standard. So that definitely is something that is different, and we acknowledge that. And then with this case, it's also, we agreed that there is a lower traffic impact based under both development scenarios. And we understand that was very important to people along Coconut Road during other cases that were before the council in 2016. And we also understand that that's important to the village of Estero. For consistency analysis, we do have an analysis under our environmental section, also our level of service section, and then the planning section. As I stated before, I do have our transportation reviewer on the phone, or sorry, on Zoom, who can answer questions. I do have Laura Gibson here. But those items are addressed inside the staff report. One item I did want to correct in the staff report for the LPA, and I will correct it before it goes to City Council, is that for objective 5.1, which is the coastal high hazard area, I need to update that statement where our city consultant had coordinated with the state emergency response team on the update to the model, which won't be ready or is not ready for another year and a half or so. And in conversations with the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity, their conversation was that consistency with that policy would be done at time of local development order. So it wasn't CERT that made that determination, it was the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity. So I wanted to correct that. The other inconsistency, or the main inconsistency that we saw, was our concern about this proposal with the new language of establishing the minimum standard, that it may not be consistent with the boat facility siting plan of Lee County. We wanted to go ahead and add that language just in case, so we didn't create an inconsistency. In terms of the the conservation coastal management element, the staff report should say objective 5.2. It says policy 5.2, so I will also correct that. But in objective 5.2, that is the new policy language that council adopted in 2019, and I'll go over that in the next slide. And why this is important and why we tend to disagree with the applicant's application of this new policy is, as part of the evaluation and appraisal review, the public was very concerned about the city updating its coastal high hazard map. They wanted to make sure that protections were still in place. And because the state had essentially mandated the definition of coastal high hazard and what that was supposed to protect and achieve, the people of the city wanted to make sure that protections were still in place for those properties that were originally within the old coastal high hazard map. So we went ahead and created the coastal management area. And there is a map that is associated with that, and that's part of our future land use element series. And you will see that this map includes annexed areas that were done after the city adopted its initial comprehensive plan. So it is my opinion that the city had recognized those annexed lands as needing to be associated and applicable to these associated policies. So that is why we have gone ahead and done the analysis the way we have, is because these properties are located on that map. There was an intent to go ahead and protect that area of the city. The other parts of the analysis, as the applicant has gone over, is their analysis is that they would like to use the net density based on surrounding areas and surrounding tower development, which I understand for compatibility purposes may be appropriate, but for coastal impacts, that's the intent of that policy. It's not to place more people in a hazardous situation that's subject to flooding. So again, this is a policy application that the City Council can go ahead and direct staff to apply differently, but that is why our recommendation is memorialized that way in the staff report. Other staff analysis to point out is that we did coordinate with Lee County and the Village of Estero on this petition. With Lee County, the reviewers were the Lee County Department of Transportation, but also their Environmental Sciences Division, mainly those individuals that are charged with reviewing projects for consistency with the Manatee Protection Plan. Staff acknowledges the significant amount of neighborhood and stakeholder outreach that the applicant has embarked on. The pre-filing neighborhood meeting that they held, they didn't have to hold. They did. It was a standard that the city required after the application was already under review. So we appreciate them engaging the neighborhood early. I know they also met with other public stakeholder groups and specifically did so after their second neighborhood meeting relative to the concerns that were raised by the Pelican Landing Community Association. And the reason why that is important is because that property directly abuts this property, and Pelican Landing is undergoing some significant capital improvement projects relative to their marina and their off-site marina parking facilities. So coordination is important for the functionality and the safety of that area and for how it operates. As I suggested earlier, we have received multiple email correspondence from concerned residents in the area and also from the ECCL community. And I did provide one letter that they sent to staff in March earlier this year as part of your packet. But I do understand that I think a participant from the ECCL is going to participate today. But we do know that there is still significant concerns from the boating community on whether or not there is enough public access on this project. And really, it deals with the number of boat ramps, the number of slips, off-site trailer parking, on-site trailer parking, which might be more appropriate for discussion with the companion zoning case. Staff recognizes that there's a delicate balance based on the multiple interests based on the voting community interest and also the adjacent property owners. In conclusion, the comprehensive plan contemplates two development scenarios. There is a companion rezoning request where some of the public concerns would also be appropriate for discussion. Staff acknowledges that the request before us is different from the annexation agreement, and that City Council may have to make a legislative determination to determine that the requested uses are appropriate. Because of the future land use map request, we believe that this requires an affirmative vote of more than 5 by City Council. And we also believe that the City Council has to provide their interpretation of provisions relative to the coastal management area and to density. With that, that concludes the staff presentation, and myself and others are here if you have any questions.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah. Are all the staff analysis, the concerns and recommendations given to the individuals who are from proposing the changes? And are there now any differences between what the analysis and recommendations by staff and the answers from the developer? Or are they in concurrence with what you're recommending?
The applicant, as I understand it, is not their interpretation and application of the coastal management area objectives. They believe that that should not apply to them because they were annexed into the city. They were not within the city at the time of the adoption of the comprehensive plan. And then also there's a difference of opinion of how the density analysis should be done.
Are those legal interpretations or are those not?
Derek, do you want me to, or Dave, do you want me to take a stab at that?
With respect to questions about the actual application and its impact on the comprehensive plan, I would prefer that probably Mr. Theriak respond.
See, my concern is I think the proposal is very far-reaching, and I think it's responded to most of the staff's analysis, if not all of the staff's analysis, for going forward. Now, if that's not so, and there's a legal interpretation, I would expect either our own legal staff or their legal staff to proceed along that line. But if this is an interpretation that can't be modified by two groups sitting down, it's a shame. I mean, it's a good project if they have the money for it. And I do have a question for the developer, which would be, which of their projects proposed they favor, either economically or anything?
I'm not sure when or if I'm supposed to respond to any of those questions. So I just want you to know I'm here
Derek,
to
do
answer
you want-
those.
Do we want to wait to the end of the presentations and then get into all the questions at one time?
Well,
I'm sorry.
I think we are at the end of presentations, and so Bob's got a question. I know Sam's got his question might have been answered, might not have been answered. This would probably be the appropriate time for the board to ask questions of both staff and the applicant,
Okay.
and then we can go into public comment.
Okay, sounds good. So if you'd like to answer that now, sir, that would be great.
All right, thank you. Again, for the record, Rich Ivanovich. I'm going to answer the last question first regarding the preference of the alternatives. The preference for the alternative would be to go forward with the continuing care facility. Because it's regulated by the state, we have to get the appropriate state approvals to make that occur. So that's the number one preference, with a standard high, I hate to say standard when you're talking about this type of multifamily project, but with the multifamily option being the second option if we're unable to get the necessary state approvals to do a continuing care facility.
May I continue on that? If you do go with the CCRC concept, in my mind, that would have a lesser impact on transportation, et cetera. But I'm wondering, does our area need another high-end CCRC? And
I'm sorry to interrupt you. The question is, the answer is we are in the process of doing that market analysis, and I think we're comfortable that there is going to be sufficient demand for the CCF or CCRC. They're interchangeable terms,
Right.
but in Bonita they call it a CCF.
Okay.
Now, with regard to the question about density and intensity, ultimately, in my legal opinion, it's going to come down to the city council interpreting its own comprehensive plan language. I personally believe that our analysis is the correct legal analysis, but it ultimately is going to be city council's decision whether or not to apply our methodology for determining density is appropriate, or staff's interpretation of how to calculate density for this area is appropriate. I do want to point out, however, that staff has, in fact, unless I misunderstood what Ms. Gensen was saying, increased the density on this site when it allowed 6 units per acre under the interpretation when the property initially came in. So I think it's ultimately a policy decision for the city council, and I'm sure Mr. Theriak or Mr. Rooney will correct me if they have a different legal conclusion.
Well, I'll be happy to jump.
Wait a minute, I'm still not finished. If the city council, view prevails, can you live with that?
City staff's view prevails? No.
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Yes, sir, go ahead.
David Theriak on behalf of the staff. I actually agree with Rich on his interpretation. This is going to be a question for the city council to determine how to construe that policy. And they can either agree with the city staff's interpretation or the applicant's interpretation, but the city council is allowed to construe its plan, and that'll be an issue for them to decide.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Bob, any more questions, or are you good?
Just one brief one. I know that we've received a lot of concern about the number of boat slips. And I know that the proposal is an increase on those boat slips. Is there any reason that the number of boat slips could not be increased by, say, at least one?
I want to make sure I understand the question correctly. When you're talking about the wet slips versus, so going from 10 to 11, is that the
Yeah.
question, or you're not the parking?
Not the parking. No.
Not the trailer parking. You're talking about the overall boat slips. If you don't mind, can we go through the rest of the questions, and then maybe if you take a break, we can come back and respond to that question?
That'll be fine. We'll keep moving on down. If Bob's done now, Don, do you have anything you'd like to ask? We can't hear you, Don. Can
I think he's still on mute.
Still can't hear you, Don. Can't hear you, buddy. Nope.
How's that?
There
Now
we go.
You got it?
Now you're good. Can you start over, please?
Sure. I got a couple things. I guess everybody's probably going to harp on the boat ramp thing. The single boat ramp, if you've ever been a boater, that's a disaster. There's always something at a boat ramp, and all you have to do is have one of those, and everything will be jammed up forever. I don't see why there can't be two of them, number one. And the boat parking, that looks a little complex from what I was able to look at. We had 500 and some pages to go through, and there was a lot of back and forth in those pages. But I don't think the 15 spots is enough. And it also looks like it's going to be very, very tight in the event a car and a boat and a tow vehicle come in there and it's full. It's going to be very difficult to get back out of there. They refer to the extra off-site parkings as being in close proximity. That sure doesn't look close to me on the map. But I'll leave that for somebody else to discuss. I noticed there was a lot of things when I went through that. One of them was the original 75-foot building elevation for one building. And now from what I'm looking at, there's two, one at 245 feet and one at 115 feet. I think that's just crossing over the line a little bit. There was some question about water retention. I don't know if anybody's considered what they're using downtown in Bonita as the bioreactor, which I understand is showing great promise, which also allows parking on top of it. So that's another feature. I read in there, and I really had trouble tracking it down, that there was an anticipated 80 to 85% reduction in impact fees. I'd like that explained if you would. And I had something else on here and I'm digging for it, but that's basically my concerns. I just think there's way too much there and we're missing a lot. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
May I respond, or?
Yes, sir. Please.
Thank you. A couple of things, and I've got Danville Ledbetter here to address the parking configuration and the ramp issues. But I think what we're doing is we're kind of delving into the PD level review as part of the comprehensive plan amendment process. So I think we have to be careful to look at the details of the PD later when the PD is actually in front of both the zoning board and city council. On the bigger picture items, which is what the comprehensive plan deals with, keep in mind that we acquired this off-site parking to provide additional parking for the boating community. And we have agreed to provide shuttle service for those using that additional parking when it's necessary, generally during the holiday season and the peak season. So we've made provisions to, again, provide more accessibility to the water than exists today. I think it's also important to remember that the original plan that is in front or adopted in the zoning ordinance that frankly can no longer be implemented without further action was a different developer's vision for what could happen on the property. And as we know, 6 years later, that vision never occurred. That vision never occurred because it's not supported by the market. That goes back to one of the earlier questions I was asked. Is there a market for a CCF? We believe so. The developer in 2014 thought there was a market for his vision that he got adopted in the zoning. There was no market for that vision. And as Jackie pointed out early in her comments, the city council, as well as other developers, were given an opportunity to acquire this property long before London Bay did. So what has London Bay done through our proposed growth management plan amendments is actually had many, many, many meetings with the local community to provide increased public access to the water. Have we made everybody happy? Of course not. But what we have done is we have listened and we have increased both the parking on site for those trailers and provided parking off site. Right now, you have zero public access to that waterway. If we can't come up with a project that works for the property owner as well as the community, you will continue to have zero public access to that waterway. You look at what is there today committed in the PD versus what we're proposing and committed in the comprehensive plan amendment, you can see that London Bay has taken into consideration the community's input as well as the community, which is the surrounding community, because they're impacted as well. I think it's important for Danville to come in and address regarding the ramp and the parking, because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of public comment on that, and maybe other members of the LPA have those same questions. So I'll turn it over to Danville to quickly address those comments. But I want to make sure we don't get too focused on the zoning details as we're looking at the growth management plan amendments.
Thank you, Rich. For the record, Danville, Ledbetter, London Bay Homes. So I think we started this process maybe 2.5 years ago plus. As Jackie mentioned, we started this process with a meeting that wasn't necessarily required by your code, but important for us. And one of the things that we wanted to make sure we did right from the outstart was to understand what the public's concerns were around access. And it was very apparent in that first meeting that a lot of this access and the concern that the public had was relative to boating, the boating community, and the marina itself. And so the first plan that we put forth outlined 10 boat trailer spaces, a handful of car spaces, and then it had the slip component as well. And what we learned very, very quickly is that there were some deficiencies in that plan that we needed to address. And that's kind of, you know, the benefits of going through this process and being willing to reach out is you get that feedback real time. So what I'd like to do is sort of take the board members through sort of how we see some of the issues and how we've dealt with some of the issues and concerns that have been brought up to us as we've gone through the process. So the first, I think somebody has already mentioned it, and Rich really hit this too, because this goes back to this one singular issue. There are a lot of competing interests involved in any development, but particularly in this piece of property and as it relates to this one particular issue. So when we've been meeting with different groups, we are doing our best to ensure that we're skating that fine line between trying to make these, you know, any particular group happy without alienating or making it difficult for other groups. So, you know, one of the things that this body needs to understand is that the location of our public marina is going to be located very closely to Pelican Landing's existing marina. So there is significant sensitivity on our side to all of our neighbors. but particularly the ones that share access. So as we went through the process, some of the feedback that we got was on the ramps themselves. And so our original plan had one 15-foot ramp, and the configuration of the parking area was a little bit difficult for boaters to be able to back and maneuver, and it had flaws. And so one of those was the ramp itself and the size. So we had a 15-foot ramp originally, and we increased the size of that ramp to 18 feet to accommodate, really with this in mind. And one of the things that we hear the most about boaters is ensuring that you can get quick access. And I think one of the board members just mentioned that. And so as we go through these points, a lot of that comes back to that point and how we're dealing with that. So, and that was really instrumental for me when I was sitting down with people to understand why 2 ramps was so important. And it really comes down to whether or not you can effectively and quickly get into the water without a lot of impediment. So the way that we dealt with that is ensuring that there was plenty of space so that even a novice was able to back in to a single ramp as best and with the most space as possible. We increased the entire area of the parking lot so that we could create greater maneuverability, especially in front of the ramp, so that we had more space for novice drivers and boaters to be able to maneuver to get down into the ramp. We created a straight line approach. If you're a boater and you've launched your boat, it's important that it's not a circuitous path down to the ramp. And that's originally, we had boaters kind of taking a circuitous path. So we wanted to make sure that we had a straight line approach to make it easy for people to access the water. It was also important to ensure that when you come into the parking lot, that you're not queuing up in a way that doesn't allow people to come and access the ramp, unload their boat, and then park. We had it all originally combined. So what we did to address that particular issue was we created a separate queue lane to allow people to come into the parking lot, separate from the parking, to allow boaters to come in, untie their boats, separate from the ramp. So that you wouldn't be in the middle of the ramp while you're doing this. Wait if there's somebody using the ramp, you could wait for them to clear, then you can go ahead and access the water. Very recently, actually, and in the last NIM, we got one more piece of feedback that was very helpful and something that we implemented that you didn't see on this plan, but we'll make sure happens as we go through the appropriate PD process, which is a dump lane. So if you're coming into the parking lot and you see that it's full, you don't have to go through this circuitous process to get out. You'll ultimately merge in with the residential egress lanes and come back onto Coconut Road in an area that's already been designated as an egress. So we're not adding additional egress and difficulty for our neighbors. We're keeping all of that succinct. The time-sensitive aspect is very important. We talked about that. There's a couple of things that address that issue. One of them is making sure that the ramp is designated purely for boaters with that access, and you're not mixing uses. So we have taken the kayak launch and made sure that the kayak and the paddle boards are not mixed with the ramp. Lots of times, if you're a boater, you recognize that those things create difficulties. So we ensured that, and Mark kind of went through this, we have a separate launch that is specifically designed to allow for paddle boards and kayak folks to get into the water with ease. And we've also are providing racks so that in an area where you could have a group of folks staged so they're not sitting inside of the ramp. Again, a very important aspect of ensuring that you get that, the ability to get on and off quickly. The other thing is, as a boater, you want to make sure that your boat is safe if you're not on it and you're parked. So, we mentioned the increase of 10% to actually 10 publicly provided transient slips. That's important because if you if you put your boat in the water, you need a place for it to be staged while you park and while you get ready with your group. So we increased that number in addition to providing for public safety, the police and fire as well. But we increased the number just for the transient slips as it relates to the slip to the ramp, so that we could facilitate this ease of coming off the water and going into the water, based on feedback that we had heard. You know, originally our plan had 10 boat trailer slips, and we did hear that the need for more. So we increased that by 50%, bringing in 15%. In addition to that, I want to say, you know, we added to the landmass, but we're also maximizing the landmass that's dedicated to the parking area, because we're a part of our water management plan will be the acceptance of the water management flow from the parking lot. So we're not going to burden the public's area with the additional landmass required to treat. We're going to accept the treatment and incorporate that into the residential water management plan. And then, of course, you know, in addition to that, we have approached Lee County, and they have seen no objection to providing parallel parking along the south side of our property line, which brings that total car count to about 34 car spaces, which is the 8 that's on site, as we mentioned in the comp plan. But then we have additional off-site that is contiguous, that will help serve both as a means to ensure that people don't park illegally, because you're much less likely to double park than you are to park in an area that's landscaped. And it also provides the additional parking that the public had requested. So in addition to the 50% of additional boat trailers, we've provided a significant number of additional car spaces. The other piece is, of course, the offsite. So we've perfected that with Lee County through another zoning action. And so we have 10 boat trailer spaces and 14 additional car spaces for those circumstances where you have heavy use. I think it's important to note that all of these increases require permits. So the initial permit was already in place when we bought the property for 72 wet slips and 10 upland boat trailer slips. It's also important to note that those, and I won't get into the technical aspect of it, but basically as the applicant goes through the process for the first time for a new marina, the FDEP looks to the Florida Fish and Wildlife to establish what that limit count would be, because you're impacting a natural resource, right? Everything that, you know, these slips and this ramp gets access to a natural resource. And so they established a limit, and that limit in the permit was 10 boat trailer spaces, as well as 72 wet slips. So we didn't change the wet slip count, but we did modify the core permit to add this additional 5 slips to the permit. So in the original permit, the way they established that is looking at the historical use of the property, and they come up with that limit based on how the property was used historically. And so by adding to what was previously permitted in the permit, we are actually increasing the number of slips from what could have been historical use of the property as established by the previous permit. We have the ability to be able to do that because there are additional slips that are part of a dry slip storage that's also in the existing Coconut Village comp plan. And we're trading dry slip storage, stack storage slips to allow the public to have more slip count. And that's where the additional, there was a question about it, that's where the additional 5 slips have come from, and that's where the additional 10 offsite, because it's all coming through the same impacts. So I think we've pretty much hit most of the high points as to why and how we've tried to address to ensure that the boaters don't queue, don't have long waits, The only other thing I'll say is that with a ship store and a high-end boat club on site, this is unlike a lot of the other facilities in both Lee and Collier County. This is not a passive launch. There will be active businesses there on site that will have some oversight. And I'm not going to say that that's their sole purpose, but it certainly helps. And it's something to mention as it relates to ensuring that ramp is as clear as possible and that we're addressing the issue of quick access. Right, pretty much everything. So with that, if there's any other questions, I'm available. Thank you.
Don, do you have any follow-up?
Still on mute.
Don, you're on mute.
Yep, got it. You all set?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, let somebody else have the floor. That's all I have for now. Thank you.
So briefly, I might answer one of Don's questions, which was on the impact fees. The reason, the basis of the 80% reduction comes from the annexation agreement. At the time that the properties annexed into the city, Lee County had reduced their impact fees by 80%. Our current interpretation on that issue is twofold. One, the way the language of the annexation agreement, it adjusts basically to the current Lee County reduction, which is still reduced from what the city of Bonita charges. And I have had some preliminary conversations with Mr. Jovanovich regarding whether or not the city would honor the full 80%. And that will basically probably come down to a balancing of the interests at the time of annexation. So at the annexation, the city was getting a proposal, which was what we call the Coconut Village project. That project has been modified. And so therefore, some of the benefits the city was receiving, we may not necessarily treat that annexation agreement with respect to impact fees as if the current proposal is the same. However, as you saw today, a lot of what they are proposing is the same with respect to public benefit. So I think there's going to be continuing conversations on that point.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. I'm going in the order that you appear on my screen. Linda, do you have anything you'd like to ask?
Yeah, my main concern was the one that Sam mentioned initially, which was this would allow the placement of vulnerable populations in a coastal high hazard area and coastal management area. So that is my primary concern. And in terms of the finer details of it, I appreciate the improvement in water quality and especially the elimination of septic systems and also the increased and guaranteed public access. So those are my main thoughts on it.
Thank you, Linda.
Population. Am I muted? Can I make a brief comment on the vulnerable populations concern? One of the good things about the CCF review process is there is a required management plan that has to be adopted and in place to assure that appropriate evacuation occurs well in advance of any storm event. So if you're looking for the population to be protected the best, the CCF option is really the best one because they will have to have a plan in place to evacuate ahead of the storm and come back after the ramifications of the storm occur. That's a process that the state requires you to go through, as well as your own code requires an evacuation plan for, I'll call it your standard multifamily. So I think that is going to be properly addressed through the comments or the statutory review process, as well as your code review process.
Thank you. Linda, anything else or is that it? Okay, Sam.
I have a few comments and then a couple of questions. My comments are that the presentation by both the staff and by the applicant have been very good. It's a very nice project. And my real opinion here is that this would become more of a multi-family project because I think economically that will work better for the developer. And I think that it brings more people down to the waterfront, which we don't have much of. Residents all along Hickory Boulevard have taken up all the views the public can have. So I think this is a nice project and by a quality developer that will bring something for the entire community of Bonita. My questions revolve around, we're not the zoning board. The presentation here I saw today and the questions and the conversations deal more with what the zoning board is going to ask and do. We are the local planning agency, and all we need to do is make sure the project meets the requirements of the land development, or the zoning ordinance, or the comprehensive plan. My question to staff would be, what are the two things that they are not compliant with and that we need to vote on? And I would guess it's the height, and it might be the idea of having a vulnerable population near the water. So if staff could answer that for the board here, I think that would help us or lead us to a proper vote with regard to whether or not this is a good project in terms of the comprehensive plan. Zoning will have their chance later. That's all I have.
Thank you, Sam.
Would you like me to respond to that question now or wait?
You can respond now, please.
Okay. So the inconsistency that we outlined in the staff report was regarding the coastal management area application. So based on the interpretation we previously had on that and how it would apply, and again, it's a new policy, but the concepts are not new. The concepts used to be in the coastal high hazard language of the comprehensive plan. And the applicant had mentioned, you know, we had increased density when we adopted the initial comprehensive plan for the Coconut Village category. But in doing so, we did it based on the existing comprehensive plan land use classification of the Pelican Landing DRI that the city did when they adopted their comprehensive plan. So based on how we have applied the policy as we have understood council has asked us to do previously in previous councils for them, that is the inconsistency we see based on the comprehensive plan. The other inconsistency deals with the annexation agreement, which is not necessarily directly the request that's before us today. However, it is intertwined. The height discussion, the current language now does not limit the one building. That was the annexation agreement. So if you look at the language now regarding height, it doesn't set forth a limitation on the maximum number of structures. So that's going to be, again, probably a legislative determination by the city council as it relates to the annexation agreement, the current Coconut Village, and then the proposal before them.
Let me,
If you don't mind, Sam, do you mind if I augment that a little bit? And just, I think you're correct, Mr. Vincent, on you know, what is the role of the LPA at this point. I think there were advantages in putting forth all this additional information because this is a big project, but there's a lot of public eyes on it. So we don't want we don't want this to be opposed for lack of transparency. And certainly the applicant has put more in to the comp plan level than would normally be expected. With respect to the annexation agreement and the comment that Jackie you just made, the 75-foot, the annexation agreement allows for or provides for one structure over 75 feet. And so that is why we're discussing the annexation agreement, because that's pretty much going to be something that gets included in this project because it was contemplated throughout the entire annexation coming into the city, and it was anticipated to be part of the planning process going forward. Where you are looking at it is, one, it's a legislative change, so it's a new district, is you are looking at all those areas that are impacted by other provisions of the comp plan by this proposal. And that does include coastal high hazard area and the 75-foot limitation, as it certainly impacts other structures within the project. So if the project could have 5 towers over to 75 feet, then that goes well beyond what was anticipated by the annexation agreement. I just want to sort of make that clear.
So it seems like I enjoyed the presentation. I think it was important for the quality of the project. However, if you're making a presentation to the LPA and that our job is not to value the validity of the project or to look at the aesthetics of the project, then why not focus on what's important to this board? Because in that presentation, the beauty of it and the benefit to the city takes prominence over what we're to vote on. So I get confused by listening to all of that information when it could have been condensed to specifically address what this board has to address. Now, if we vote yes on this thing, and I guess that's what we're doing today, is either voting the project in or out or making a recommendation to the city council. There are 3 items that we are making a proposal on or a recommendation to the board, the council on. One is height, one is the coastal area, and the other is the annexation requirements. Is that correct, Derek?
Really, it's the first 2.
Okay, the first 2. So as it stands right now, the staff has made recommendations. We haven't heard, I would like to hear how the developer would begin to try and compromise with the requirements of the staff and the comprehensive plan on those 2 points. Because if they can't, then I have to vote against the project. But if they can show that they will somehow mitigate their design to incorporate these requirements or these concerns, then yes, we can look at that positively.
Thank you.
Is it my turn?
Yes, sir. Please
Okay,
respond.
thank you. And Mr. Vincent, we have spent almost 2 years working with staff on the proposed comprehensive plan language. And we are at the point of we are only 0.4 units per acre different from staff on the continuing care facility project. I think staff says 6, we say 6.4. Our project is a very good project, and we'd like staff to compromise with us and go to the 6.4. The reality is on a standard multifamily project, it makes no economic sense to go forth and provide all of the public benefits that we would be providing at a density of 6 units per acre. So that's where we are, and it's not unusual for staff to basically say, and it's a call for the legislative body, the city of Bonita Springs, to make the decision, what does it prefer? I don't think staff is saying it's a bad project. I think staff is saying this is their read of the comprehensive plan, how you measure density versus our read. And I think Mr. Theriak agrees, we'll let the city council make that ultimate decision. I didn't hear them say from a comprehensive planning standpoint that this was a bad comprehensive plan amendment. They just said their interpretation of the density interpretation is different than ours. So it comes down to you all to decide from a comprehensive planning perspective, do you think what we're proposing, and the reason a lot of times we present to you all the details of the zoning aspects of it is because a lot of times the public wants to know what's going to happen if you recommend approval of certain revisions to the comprehensive plan. And we also knew you were going to get a lot of public comment about the boat and public access to the water. So we thought we'd go ahead and include that in our presentation. So what at the end of the day, you got to see the ramifications of a yes vote if you were to recommend our proposed changes. We think that from a planning perspective and and Alexis did, I think, a great job explaining from a planning perspective, what we're asking to be allowed on this property from a comprehensive planning perspective is worthy of a recommendation of approval from your board. I hope that, I don't want to put Jackie on the spot as whether she likes the project or not. It's really not her job. She was just pointing out to you where she has a different interpretation than us. We're hoping you'll agree with, recommend approval of our interpretation to the city council, who will ultimately make the decision on that. So that's a long-winded answer to, I think we've gotten as close as we can get to with staff over the last 2 years. And we hope that you can support our request.
Jeff, can I answer that?
Yes, sir.
If you go with multifamily, it means that you're at 11.4, which is maybe not intensity, but it increases some density here. You get a lot of people there as a point. If a hurricane comes through here, or there are other problems with weather and so forth, and we approve this project, that makes us look like we're not being concerned about the people in low coastal areas, doesn't it?
No, I don't. I disagree. A couple of reasons. One, the project that will be built here will have to obviously meet the building code requirements, and we will be required to have an evacuation plan in place for that project. So we will have to address concerns about hurricane evacuation. Now, although the comprehensive plan isn't going to say what the price points are for these units, but I think we all know from a market standpoint, the people who acquire these multifamily units, the vast majority of them are not going to be here during the hurricane season. But we plan for them as if they are here in the hurricane season, and we do properly design and build the buildings, and we have an evacuation plan in place. So I don't think you're putting anybody in harm's way without properly analyzing the implications of increasing that density.
So the only thing that would be impacted would be the traffic, and we have, I think, a responsible report from the traffic engineer, right?
Yeah, so from a traffic standpoint, there's no question what we're proposing is the winner from a reduction of traffic.
Okay, thank
But
you.
we did show an earlier slide on hurricane evacuation if you need us to pull that back up.
Well, I think that was a good response. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, this is David Theriak. May I follow up on Mr. Vincent's question?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Vincent, I think you're absolutely right that there are two parts of the comprehensive plan that staff has a disagreement with on the applicant. That's only part of the test. The fundamental part of this test is whether the change to the language in Coconut Village and the new uses and the new different types of densities are something that the city should support. And that's separate from whether there's an inconsistency with the comprehensive plan. You get to exercise your legislative authority today to say, do we want to approve these changes in the Coconut Village future land use map category? And then you can also get to the two issues that have been disputed between staff and applicant. But that fundamental question is, are you comfortable with the revisions to the future land use map category that's before you today? Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was very helpful. And based on that, I think, yes, it's a great project. It's a good project. Because sooner or later, we have to learn to build in areas like this. And I've always been a proponent of that, of how do we learn to build next to the mangroves and next to the water and have to be a good project and a responsible project.
Thank you, Mr. Vincent. Okay, let's see here. That is going to leave us with Rex, Mr. Sims. Can anyone hear him? No. Mr. Sims, we cannot hear you.
Can you hear me now? All right.
Thank you, sir.
I have a few concerns. And my primary concern is that I think this is a good project and I think it's needed. I'm not sure that this is the proper location for it. But my first concern is how this annexation agreement that occurred some time ago could generate a 20-story building in Bonita Springs. That's kind of a mystery on how well that happened, and I'm quite sure there'll be other people talk about it. But I'm not sure that that went down as well could be explained. Now, item 2, this is a very intensive development. It has many square foot of roofs, parking lots, streets, and walkways, and it's many square feet of impervious area. There is going to be a significant surface water management problem that needs to be addressed. I'm not sure that I could see, we have assurance that that's going to happen, but I don't know how it's going to happen. There's going to be 7 buildings altogether. And my big problem is the item 3. When we incorporated the city, I was part of the team that had to provide evacuation from the beach. And so I'm a little bit familiar with storm emergency evacuation. It appears to me that there's a big difference between having a 300 unit convalescent care in evacuation than if you had 300 unit living facility or condos there. And I'm in agreement that during hurricane season, if it was a condo units, that many of the people would not be here. But if it's a care unit, that is a significant thing to handle. Now, the big problem is everybody has said, oh yeah, we're going to have a program to evacuate all these people. The problem is that it's going to be, whatever plan it is, it's going to come out over a 2-lane Coconut Road. And Coconut Road already has the Hyatt, has the Colony, has all of Springs, what's the mobile home park down there? Has
Spring Creek Village.
Spring Creek Village, yeah, and has El Dorado Acres, and it's already a level E. It goes for 2 miles, and there's going to be more development down at the intersection of Coconut Road and 41, which is going to further impact the usage of it. So whatever evacuation program comes up, it's all going to go down Coconut Road unless there's some magic developed between now and then. Coconut Road is already, before we have this project built, it's already a service 3E level, and adding more to it of a care unit where you would have infirm people being evacuated and so forth is really a concern to me. I don't think that I think this is a very extensive development for this piece of property, and I find it very difficult to be in favor of it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, at this time, we're going to allow public comments or questions.
And Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. We have just a brief comment to those comments before.
I apologize.
And
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. And I'll try to keep it brief, and I'll let Mark come up here and expand if as necessary. I think we need to make sure we understand what a CCF, a continuing care facility, really is. We're talking about 300 independent living units, and we're talking 75 assisted living facilities, memory care beds. We are not talking about infirm people. The quality of the units that these in the independent living units are going to be living in. I will give you an example. If you're familiar with Moorings Park and their various communities in the city of Naples and in Collier County, that's what the CCF that is envisioned here is. These are individuals who are very active, very mobile, very engaged with each other. It is not a convalescent home. So the concern about people being able to safely leave on their own, let alone through the access, the emergency management plan we'll have in place, I don't think you need to worry about in this location. And then also, I think staff agrees, Mr. Ross, who reviewed this, agrees with our transportation consultant that this is an actual reduction in traffic on Coconut Road. And I would think if the concern is traffic on Coconut Road and how it's functioning right now, you would encourage what we're proposing in the revisions that could occur to allow for better transportation on that road. And in the details of the hurricane evacuation plan that Mr. Trescott prepared, he's analyzed the impact on hurricane evacuation. And if you went the multifamily route, it's a very de minimis impact on that hurricane evacuation. And we're certain, and your staff is not raising issue with that concern. So I think I wanted to properly characterize the types of people that would be living in the continuing care facility and how it is actually beneficial to the overall concerns about transportation.
Thank you. Mr. Sims, does that?
If I could, can I just add briefly to what Rich said? I do want people to understand that when we're talking about a life plan community and what we're envisioning, what it is, and it certainly isn't a convalescent home, the 300 independent living units would feel and live very similar in terms of design and living to any condominium that we would design on the water or any of the condominiums currently in Pelican Landing. There is very little difference between them. I will give you an example of the project that we're currently in partnership with Moorings Park, which is Moorings Park Grand Lake, which is 275 independent living units. And we've finished our first phase, building our second phase and moving into our third phase. And just to give you an idea, the average age is 74. In order to get into the project, they have to actually pass a test to make sure that they're physically capable of living independently, and that they also have to pass a cognitive test. And we would see a similar situation here. And the whole purpose of independent living is that you can live independently. The portion that would be assisted living and memory care is relatively small, only 75 bed facility for that. So most of the people moving into this will probably be golfers. They still play tennis. As part of the facilities, we'll have substantial exercise facilities. There'll be a movie theater inside of that, walking trails around the project. We want it on this piece because we think that they'll love getting out on the water and actively boating. So think about many of the people today that live in Bonita Bay or Pelican Landing that have reached that 70 to 75, but are still active and are thinking about how do I take care of my long-term health concerns going forward. And the beauty of a life plan community is that you know you've got the guarantee of continued health care, continued maintenance of everything that goes along with the project, and multiple restaurants for you to eat at, and you don't need to worry about doing all those things yourself. The whole purpose is to add an enjoyment and enhanced lifestyle as people age, and in actual fact, resulting longevity, an increase in longevity. They're not moving into a nursing home and expecting to be there for a couple of years. They're expecting to have a very fruitful life for a very long period of time. So I hope that helps.
Thank you. Rex, does that adequately answer your questions and concerns?
When I go to Moorings Park as a guest, I notice a great many of the people in the dining room are either in walkers and several in wheelchairs. So it's still an evacuation is not everybody's going to run down and jump in their car and drive away. It's going to require more than that. but I understand what you're saying, and I agree with you to a certain point, but yet it's in a convalescent situation, there's going to be more issues in evacuation than there would be in just normal living facilities. Now, the question keeps coming back. You keep talking about the evacuation and the traffic on Coconut Road. The traffic on Coconut Road has nothing to do with what I'm referring to. In an evacuation situation, Coconut Road is supporting all of the colony, all of Spring Creek, all of the El Dorado Acres, all of the residential units in the colony and so forth. And this is something we're adding to it. So I'm saying that the existing facility for Coconut Road in emergency evacuation is already at a service E level, and adding this just adds to the problem. So it's not the daily traffic on Coconut Road, it's the emergency evacuation that I have concern about. Thank you.
Did you want to respond to that, sir?
Am I unmuted yet? No, sir. We made our comments regarding that. Thank you.
Jeff, I have a comment.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Rex, I'm familiar with Bentley Village, and I know that before the last hurricane that we had, their policy was to put everyone on buses and take them to Orlando, which they did do. So I would imagine something like this would happen in this development. Just a bit of information for you.
Absolutely. If I didn't say it as clearly and succinctly as Mr. Vincent, but that's a requirement of what we're asking. We will have to have that plan in place.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, I think that's all of the board's questions. Now we're going to move, if that's all right with everybody, to public comment.
Hi, Jeff.
Yes.
Chairman, this is Addison Smeckle, IT Manager, Communications Department. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call on them in the order the emails were received. This is your decision on the time frame you would like to give the public comment. What we've been doing virtually is 3 minutes. I have a timer here. Is 3 minutes okay with you?
That sounds great.
All right,
Mr.
ahead,
Chairman, while Addison's doing that up and calling up the first person.
Have them ready, Derek. They're here.
Are you ready to go?
Oh, yes, they're already in the meeting. Yes.
Okay. I suggest we let them go. We did get a number of emails that Ms. Kenson pointed out were received. We didn't have time to put a lot of those into the packets, so for other public members to see. So after the public who has been waiting patiently to speak, after they speak, I'll go ahead and read into the record those additional emails.
Awesome.
That would be great. Thank you.
All right, so first up is going to be Ann Kramer. Ann, you're up. Go ahead, ma'am.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for your
Okay, very good. I'll try to keep this to 3 minutes. Thank you so much. I appreciate this opportunity to speak, and I'll try to, again, limit my comments. My comments are not focused on the public access issue. So first, I'd like to compliment the staff for their thorough report. It seems quite clear that between the coastal high hazard regulations, FEMA regulations, and our comprehensive plan, this proposed Bayview development should not be allowable. It's concerning that London Bay is asking the city to make a dramatic change to the comprehensive plan, yet the plan was not designed to be altered casually. This proposed Bayview development is located entirely within a designated coastal high hazard area, and London Bay is simply not supposed to be allowed to build what it's proposing. State law simply does not allow an increase in density beyond what currently exists in this location. Federal and state laws and policy number 5.2 have become more robust in an attempt to minimize the damages caused by hurricane and storm damage. FEMA anticipates having to dole out far more dollars in the future as coastal areas are becoming more vulnerable. And the fact that London Bay's scenario number 1 includes a continuing care development that would house a vulnerable population in this location is, in my opinion, preposterous. And quite frankly, to minimize the physical disabilities and the frailties of the people in those 75 units is, in my opinion, unconscionable. The second Bayview scenario for the 300 residential units is also not allowable because it is basically doubling the density allowed for this coastal high hazard area. And while those structures would be built to hurricane standards, that construction simply does not overcome the location. So the quality of construction argument is not relevant when you still need to evacuate people, including those who are most vulnerable. And in reading what I read in the paperwork, the notion that one bus is the evacuation plan is simply not adequate. And maybe people have to go all the way to Orlando, but I'm not sure where Bonita could shelter the vulnerable population that would be part of this. But further, London Bay's net density argument, in my opinion, is ludicrous. Pelican Landing's towers were built and they were part of a DRI. That DRI covers literally thousands of acres of land. So that just simply does not hold water. So in simply keeping with the law, there seems no way that this planning board or the zoning board or the city council can legally vote to allow this proposal. The responsibility and duty of this local planning agency to stop this attempt to diminish the city's comprehensive plan and to uphold both state and federal law is in your hands today. This seems to be simply another example, an attempt to overbuild on a parcel of land. But in this case, that parcel is in a hazardous area. And I implore each of you to vote to disallow this illegal and preposterous proposal and abide by the state mandated provisions and our own policy 5.2. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Kramer. Did London Bay want to respond to that?
Should we do all public comment first?
Mr. Chairman, I think the best approach is we'll just respond at the end of the public comment to the things.
That works for me. Okay.
All righty, so up next we have Joanne Ribble. You're up, ma'am.
Mrs. Ribble, can you hear us?
Can you hear me now?
You can. Thank you.
Hello?
Yes, can you hear us?
Okay. Yes, I can.
Right.
Again, my name is Joanne Ribble, and I am a resident of the colony at Pelican Landing. I have been following the development of the London Bay project since the very first focus group meetings. I want to applaud London Bay's commitment to have public access to Estero Bay on their Bayview property. And I am in total agreement with the one boat ramp proposal. They have amended the design for safety and maneuverability as per the boaters' suggestions. The proposed marina was not meant to be a launch area to accommodate boaters from all of Lee County. There are sufficient launch areas with ample parking already in the area. Future construction on Coconut Road, which will include Raptor Bay and the new Coconut Landing development, will increase traffic substantially. We do not need the additional traffic congestion of boat traffic that a larger public marina will bring. Coconut Road cannot be widened. Coconut Road cannot safely handle the current traffic it encounters in season now. If this property is to be developed as a CFS, that would be the least impactful for our immediate area. Please do not require London Bay to increase marina capacity in parking or in boat slips, nor require the addition of a second boat ramp. The additional traffic that would bring would cause a perilous situation for those who must use Coconut Road for our ingress and egress into the community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Ribble. Next up, please.
All righty, so next up we have Nico Zepp. You're up, sir.
Hey, good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Mr. Zepp. Thank you for your patience. Go ahead.
No problem. So Nico Zepp, been a resident of Estero since 2015 and been boating in the area, since then as well. And I think overall it's a really beautiful well thought out development by, London Bay and their team. And, I think there's valid concerns on both sides being brought up here, but, ultimately my view on this is I think it brings, healthy economic growth to the area, with short-term jobs for construction, long-term jobs for the, the staff that would be on property there. And, in regards to the boat launch marina, I think it adds huge value to the community here in Bonita and Estero. I mean, there just simply isn't, there's nothing like this currently in the area. A couple things that I thought were key notes is the attention to the need to improve the water quality, and I think that's being addressed. As far as the capacity of the marina and the parking spots within that space, I think it's very reasonable. And to the previous speaker's point, I mean, there's plenty of other locations in Lee County and Collier County that are, I don't think this marina and boat launch is meant to draw those people in. It's for the direct community and the users of, Bonita and Estero area. So I think it's perfect for that. As far as there being no cost to the user and or the city for this, again, I don't know of many ramps in the area that are free of charge, which is also an added benefit. And as far as the boat club and just direct bay access, it's going to give members of the community potential access to enjoy the beautiful waters here in Southwest Florida that otherwise may not have that chance. So all in all, I think again, this is well thought out, and there's maybe a few hurdles that have to be worked through, but I'm confident that hopefully an agreement can be made. That's all I have.
Thank you for your input. We appreciate it. Okay.
All righty, so we have Alan Hergenhan up next. Go ahead, sir. You're up.
Mr. Hergahan, can you hear us?
No, I cannot. I cannot hear you.
Okay, how about now? And
Well, I can hear you, but can you hear me?
yes, sir, I can loud and clear. Thank you for your patience. Go ahead with your questions or comments.
Yeah, thank you. My concerns pertain to the boating issue. When I first heard about the plans for Bayview on Estero Bay, many people were concerned what would happen to the Weeks Fish Camp site. Fortunately, I was invited to attend the first private meeting with a very small group of individuals. Mr. Mark Wilson and Danville made their pitch for Bayview that day. After listening to the group, we were able to ask questions. What immediately caught my attention was the very small area allotted for the general public to launch boats and park their boat trailers. I remember asking Mark Wilson if any additional land could be utilized for 2 boat ramps to be built, not just one 18-footer. I also questioned the very limited parking. To my displeasure, Mark answered very quickly, no. I then countered by asking if any part of the boat ramp or the parking lot plans could be renegotiated. Again, Mark's reply was no. Today, we see the plans for Bayview on Estero Bay for 1 ramp, limited parking remaining the same, no improvement. Correct me if I'm wrong, has the 3 acres been increased or does it stay at the 3 acres? Oh, Mark, there are some minor features that you did present, which I like, but nothing for the launching of boats and parking the trailers on site. Today, the committee and the elected village council of Bonita Springs will have control whether the general public, Bonita, Estero, North Naples, San Carlos, deserve a fully functional public boating site, or will London Bay's Mark Wilson obtain what he wants. I think the total picture of Bayview, 7 buildings, 50 to 70 boat slips, to residents needing independent living or care in a senior-centered living community truly need that size of a marina. I feel the public would be only receive an impractical public boating site. Another concern, London Bay's rezoning signage is present on the Weeks Fish Camp property. Can a variance be made to place an additional sign on the easement property at the corner of Tamiami and Coconut Road? Not many people will see the current signage at the end of a dead-end road. Please consider my thoughts. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Hergenhan. We appreciate your comments. Okay, next on the list.
All righty, so next we have Cindy Walpole. Go ahead, ma'am, you're up.
Ma'am, can you hear us? Ma'am,
I'm here, but I'm going to pass on the comments.
you're going to pass on the comments. Okay, thank you, ma'am. Okay, next on the list.
All righty, so next we have Alan Bowditch.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Alan Bowditch here. I'm speaking on behalf of the ECCL. As most of you know, that's a non-partisan civic advocacy organization. It's not just an organization for Estero, but actually for many of the surrounding communities, which include those in North Collier. A couple of things that I would like to say this morning. The first concerns a letter that Mark Wilson wrote on the 10th of June to various members of the Bonita Bay Council. Although the ECCL did not respond publicly to a number of issues that were contained in that letter, we would like to address them at this meeting. First of all, I would say that on behalf of Jim Gilmartin, who is the president of the ECCL, he was wanting me to mention that it has never been the policy of the ECCL to resort to any inaccurate statements in the course of the work that we do. So in relation to a couple of the points that were raised in the letter, when Mr. Wilson mentioned that even the Weeks family-owned marina, there was a single boat ramp some 10 years ago, in my personal discussions with Jim Weeks, while technically that is correct, he pointed out that in fact boaters were allowed to launch side by side their boats many years ago. And so strictly speaking, the single boat ramp suggestion of many years back wasn't true. However, the other point is that, of course, issues that transpired 10 to 15 years ago in relation to the number of people who might be launching their boats at that time is far different today. There's obviously been a huge increase, some 3 to 4 times in the local population of the area, and of course an increasing number of people who want to actually carry out their boating activities. And so to try to base an idea on what is 10 to 15 years ago and what was appropriate then and what is appropriate today is clearly incorrect. The other point that was made was that there was no requirement for public access or conditions placed on the property, according to Mr. Wilson. Again, that's not strictly true, as Mr. Weeks reported to me that when he sold the land to Estero Bay Marine, a gentleman's agreement was entered into at that time. During the course of today, and indeed from Mr. Wilson's letter, we've heard many comments about the fact that neighbors value access to Pelican Landing and the marina, and they did not want a large regional type marina on the property. This has been made several times today. But it's an extremely misleading statement to indicate that boaters' suggestions of having a minimum of 2 ramps would lead to a regional type marina is quite wrong. The recommendation for expanding the single 18-foot ramp by 12 feet to allow 2 boat ramps, which would of course be 30 feet, to launch was simply the minimum requirements that were made, rather than ideally having 4 boat ramps, which would be the
Mr.
best
Bowditch?
solution.
Mr. Bowditch?
Yes.
I apologize for interrupting, but we're allowing each speaker 3 minutes, and we're over that right now. Would you like to summarize everything you'd like to put in one sentence to end it?
Well, it's rather sad that, of course, we've been hearing. I've had to stay on the line a great deal this morning, and have heard many reactionary statements from London Bay on all of these matters without the opportunity to actually provide a proper response. All I would say, in summary, is that the ECCL and myself are not representing a small minority view. The results of what we're talking about is a survey that was based on 2,000 residents and in 40 gated communities, and additionally 21 boaters in 2 focus groups, who made the point, which was also made earlier, and I will finish, that to have simply 1 boat ramp is quite practically impossible. Anyone who is going to bring their boat ashore and have other people launch at the same time will end up in a terrible bottleneck. It doesn't take a rocket science to work out, the problems that creates. So I'm going to finish in accordance with your instructions.
Okay, and again, thank you for your patience, and I think everyone understands the gist of what you're trying to convey. Thank you again. Okay, who is next?
That's it, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much, and we'll give them an opportunity now to respond to those questions and comments.
Mr. Chairman, maybe just to help our meeting go further, I'll go ahead and read into record those other emails we have that the public hasn't had an opportunity to see.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. The first one I have is from a Carlene Riley. Her email simply states, "I do not think that 1 boat ramp is adequate for Estero residents." The next comment I have is from Buck Duggendorf. And that it reads, "I understand April 17th, I believe he meant July 17th, will include discussion of decisions on the London Bay Homes proposed CCRC development. I am a 15-year resident of Bonita Springs. I testified 4 years ago against overdevelopment of the Raptor Bay Weeks Fish Camp area. I have reviewed the London Bay proposal and believe it is a good solution as can be had for that piece of land. Note, we should stop referring to the property as Weeks Fish Camp. There is no Weeks Fish Camp. They sold it many years ago. There is no need for a public boat launch on that property. Other launching ramps can be used within 5 miles north and or south, 6 miles. You cannot recreate the nostalgic memory of old Florida that is being asked. In fact, no London Bay home proposal will satisfy these boaters. Not enough ramp, not enough parking, want to operate all hours, day or night, and so on and so on. So I have left the London Bay proposal with no more public boating accommodations. In fact, I'd be happy to see that component removed. If left in, I predict future dissatisfaction and antagonism will result. There is no need to create that headache. They can drive 5 or 6 miles. Next email is from Miss Mary Green at 9028 Springview Loop in Estero, Florida. Dear council member, although London Bay proposes guaranteed public access to Estero Bay in perpetuity, offering a single boat ramp access falls short of the minimum requirements of boaters who had hoped to have an opportunity to have convenient local access to the bay and the western end of Coconut Road. Now is the time to get it right. People have spoken and continue to affirm clearly that a single boat ramp is inadequate. Two ramps are needed. The next email is from a Mr. Michael Ziegler, 19017 Elston Way, Estero, Florida. Dear council member, although London Bay proposed guaranteed public access to Estero Bay in perpetuity, offering a single boat ramp falls well short of the minimum requirements of boaters who had hoped to have the opportunity to have convenient local access to the bay at the western end of Coconut Road. I think is very important feature and amenity for our village. Next email is from Mr. Thomas Pelagny. Dear council member, although London Bay proposed guaranteed public access to Estero Bay in perpetuity, offering a single boat ramp access falls well short of the minimum requirements of boaters who had had the opportunity to have convenient local access to the bay at the western end of Coconut Road. Please don't let this happen as London Bay proposes. And his address is 2465 Corkscrew Shores, Estero, Florida. The next email is from Miss Marlene Gillespie, 10,900 Santa Margarita Road, number 104, Estero, Florida. Dear council member, regarding the proposed access of only one ramp that London Bay proposed to guarantee public access to Estero Bay in perpetuity falls well short of the minimum requirement of boaters who have hoped to have the opportunity to have convenient local access to the bay at the western end of Coconut Road. I live in the east end of Coconut Road, and I would have to drive all the way home over 4 miles to park my car after in and getting back ride from neighbor. Sounds like an impossible way to use this access. We need 2 ramps and additional parking for this to be usable by Estero residents. Next email is from a Miss Bernard Bippin at 22311 Banyan Hideaway Drive, Estero, Florida. Dear council member, although London Bay proposed guaranteed public access to Estero Bay in perpetuity, offering a single boat ramp access falls well short of the minimum requirements of boaters who had hoped to have an opportunity to have convenient local access to the bay at the western end of Coconut Road. Absolutely inadequate to think one boat ramp with limited parking would be acceptable to anyone. What you're thinking is foolish at best. Go back to drawing board and come up with greatly enhanced plan that will welcome by everyone, including your future proposed residents. Next email is from Miss Joanne Braz, 4561/Pine Way, East Estero, Florida, 33928. Although London Bay proposes guaranteed public access in perpetuity, offering a single boat ramp falls well short of the minimum requirement of boaters who had hoped to have an opportunity to have convenient access to the bay at the western end of Coconut Road. Next email is from, I'm sorry, did we have an Alan Bowdwich already speak?
Yes, he's with
Okay,
the.
so this is just, this is his email again, so he's had his comments on the record. Next email is from a Bob Krog. A single boat ramp at Old Weeks Fish Camp is not acceptable. There should be at least 2 ramps and a large number of parking spots for vehicles with boat trailers. To do nothing less is a step backward for the local residents and folks who want to use Estero Bay. Thanks for your consideration and concern of the residents who want to keep access to Estero Bay. Next email is from Charlie Strader, Kent Road, Bonita Springs. This is a fairly longer one, so if you want to time me, Addison, go ahead. Dear LPA members, first, I hope all is well. Regarding CPA 18-548980 BOS and CPA 18-5482 BOS, proposed comprehensive plan amendments by London Bay Estero Bay Investments at the Old Weeks Fish Camp properties. It appears the developer is asking for basically double the dwelling density with not a lot in return for the residents of Bonita Springs. In regards to public access and the potential increased negative effects on the waters of Estero Bay, considering the previous use approved for the property included much greater public use, it is disappointing to see such greatly decreased. I hope your decision-making, you will consider what our area may look like in 50 years as we build out. Such public access and uses along the water will become even more precious. This proposal is far different than the original annexation agreement regarding public use. This is an important parcel in regards to our local environment, archaeology, history, and boating access. As you know, our area is already limited in public access to boat ramps. If you are a boater, you know of the complications and delays that can occur in having only a single boat ramp as opposed to a double boat ramp. The internet of full videos showing what we can go wrong at boat ramps. Regarding developers' proposal of minimum use, at a minimum, the development must provide waterfront facilities. 1, publicly accessible boat ramp, 10 boat slips for public use, 1 boat slip dedicated to Estero Fire District, 1 boat slip dedicated to Lee County Sheriff's Office, and 15 boat trailer parking spaces. I consider it a week minimum and trust you can negotiate better access and use. Also, concern is the proposal of a buffer shall not be required between CPD/RPD areas, given the stated goals of the COBS resource protection and Lee County's wetland categories. The proposed development does not seem to match the intent. Stormwater runoff concerns are especially important regarding this parcel. Standard BMP of use of swales, wet/dry detention areas concern me when parcels are along the bay. I am hoping we could start improving the technology in new developments, as we all know that during wet periods, the retention areas overflow. Regarding the site's potential archaeological resources, given the site's proximity to Mountain Key, the capital of the Calusa, there is likely archaeological material still below the surface, in addition to learned anecdotal information of past sites of the property. I am aware of the limited cultural resources assessment in 2013. Granted, much of the surface of the area has been modified, but I hope you will require archaeological monitoring of subsurface disruptions during construction. Regarding approved building heights above 75 feet, well, I guess that ship has already sailed along the coast of Estero Bay, and maybe increasing height will allow a smaller footprint of impervious surface area, as stormwater is a concern of that property. Regarding the conservation/coastal management element, marina siting criteria objective 22.3 and marina siting criteria objective 2.2. Am I out of time?
You are, my friend.
Okay. I'll end it there. And I believe I have one long one I've been avoiding. All right, I have one long one, so time me on this one as well. First, I hope all of you are well. This is from, this is Charlie Straders again. Okay, so we're done.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you. And at this time, before we get into anything else, I'd like to let London Bay respond to everything that's been said.
Okay, are we sharing my screen?
You're live right
Yeah,
now.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Hold on. Can you let us share the screen, please?
There you go, sir.
Thank you, appreciate it. I just want to briefly wrap up in response to the comments. One, I appreciate your time and patience and having to do these hearings in a different format where we all can't be in the same room. Candidly, I think it's gone better than I thought it was going to go. I hope that the screen presentation is worked out okay. With regard to what we're really here for today, which is to discuss potential changes to the growth management plan, I hope you can appreciate why we did get into some of the details regarding to boater access, which that seems to be the primary concerns from your public speakers. Not all the concerns, but the primary concerns. I want to address that first and then focus back on the very limited amendments we're requesting today. From a boater access perspective, we have to remember that this property has always been in private ownership, even going back to the Weeks family in the comments we've heard in this public hearing regarding what Mr. Weeks did or did not commit to. So from the very beginning, the Weeks family has had a single boat ramp. The fact that they let other people misuse the single boat ramp to somehow launch boats in either a safe or unsafe manner does not automatically now say we should expand what the Weeks family previously committed to. And let's remember, there are no deed restrictions on this property requiring public access. The Weeks family sold the property to the predecessor of London Bay Homes without any such restrictions. A gentleman's agreement, whether it's true or not true, is not a commitment by the Weeks family and the subsequent developers to provide a second boat ramp. The current zoning on the property allows for a single boat ramp with less on-site parking than we're proposing. London Bay had over 60 meetings, not including the neighborhood information meetings that we've had regarding this project. London Bay has been responsive to the different positions of the community. You have the boating community, who some people clearly want more access at this location. And then you have other communities, Pelican Landing and the like, who would like to see potentially less boater access. What we believe we've proposed and have committed to in the comprehensive plan language is a reasonable compromise for us to move forward in the zoning process, where we do the ultimate details of how the site will ultimately get developed. Perhaps I was wrong in recommending that we include in the comprehensive plan the level of detail that we have for the boat ramp and the parking. I thought by recommending that we include it in the comprehensive plan language, we were assuring the public our commitment to fulfill an obligation that we perceive as there to provide public access to the water. That's been the primary focus of the opposition comments. Probably should have never even recommended putting it in there to assure public access. What we're here today is to ask for two changes, essentially, to the comprehensive plan. The public access change and the ability to do either 300 multifamily units or a CCF, continuing care facility, comprised of 300 independent living facilities and 75 assisted living facilities. We believe, through Alexis's testimony and Mr. Wilson's testimony and Mr. Ledbetter's testimony, that what we're proposing is consistent with the City of Bonita Springs comprehensive plan in all aspects. We believe it provides boater access. We believe it provides for an appropriate development on that property. And we believe it's a reduction in intensity and density and traffic that can currently occur on the site through the existing comprehensive plan language on only 17 acres. People are forgetting we're adding 13 acres that would also be entitled to development on it as well. It's a good project. It's a good comprehensive plan amendment. We're requesting that the LPA forward a recommendation of approval with our interpretation on how to appropriately comply with the density requirements for the coastal high hazard area, and with the assurances that are already in your code that we will provide for appropriate evacuation for the CCF. It will be more than one bus, contrary to what an earlier speaker said. There will be appropriate transportation if and when that event occurs that we have to evacuate people. We're available answering further questions you have, and we request your recommendation of approval of the text language and the map change that is before you today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. I believe now we have the first and foremost thing that we're going to do is we're actually going to vote to approve the revisions to the future land use map amendment. Let's see. Deb, would you like to do a roll call of?
We need a motion first, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Make a motion. I'd like to make a motion that we accept the project as presented.
I'll second it. Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Take a roll call on that, I guess.
Deb,
Sam Vincent,
Aye.
Tom Colapetro,
Nay.
Linda Schwartz,
Nay.
Chairman Maturo,
nay.
Rex Sims,
Nay.
Robert Bornstein.
Aye.
Okay. is everybody. And now it's my understanding that we're also going to vote on the height amendment and the coastal area. Is that correct, Derek?
No, it's all included in one
Okay,
request.
okay.
So I think if I got the vote correct, the recommendation failed.
That is correct. All right.
What was the vote?
4-2, failed.
You hear that, Bob? 4-2. It failed.
Mr. Chairman,
Wait a
Yes.
minute, wait a minute. Please read the proposal again. I'm for the proposal. Is that the way it came out?
Yes.
Okay.
The motion was to approve the recommendation for compliance with the comprehensive plan. Is that correct on that?
That's correct.
And there were 4 nays in my count and 2 in the affirmative.
Oh, no, I had it. Well, what was my vote reflected as an IA?
It was an aye.
I was for it.
Yes.
Yeah, that's how you
Oh,
voted.
Okay, so you had 4 nays and 2 A's,
Correct.
4 no's and 2 yeses. A's and nays sound alike. Okay.
Okay, now that that's taken care of, Derek, you were saying something?
No, that's it. There's no other items with respect to this petition for today.
We have to talk about when the next meeting is, Deb? Or are we playing it by ear again?
I think we're probably gonna be playing it by ear.
Okay.
Well, I'm clear. Did you vote for both amendments in the same motion, Mr. Rooney?
I believe that the only item that came up was the single ordinance.
Okay, I wasn't sure. I just heard them discussing the map. My mistake. I got it. I understand.
Okay, we don't have any approval of minutes, I don't believe. Deb,
No,
do we?
there's no minutes.
Yeah, okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and thank you for their time and their patience and adjourn this meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.